It's sunny afternoon in Riverside Park. Two children on the swings, giggling, carefree. Their mother watching from a bench. Peaceful moment. Perfect life she built from nothing. Then a black town car pulls up. Expensive. Out of place. The engine cuts. Silence. A man steps out. Tailored suit, confident stride. The kind of man who's used to getting what he wants. The mother stands up. Her whole body tenses. 3 years of carefully constructed peace about to shatter. You don't get to show up here and act like you have any right to disrupt what I've built, she says, her voice steady but fierce. Not after what you did. Here's my question for you. How many times do we give people chances they don't deserve? How long do we wait for someone to prove they've changed before we realize our peace is worth more than their promises? Before we dive in, my older sister is convinced I cannot build a massive family here on YouTube. Let's show her the power of this community. Hit that subscribe button right now. It takes half a second but brings us closer together. Let us know your state or country in the comments. Now sit back and enjoy this story about a woman who discovered that sometimes walking away is the most powerful thing you can do. And sometimes, just sometimes, the person you walked away from might actually deserve a second chance. In today's story, we explore what happens when the past you've been running from shows up in your present, demanding answers you're not ready to give. Dr. Valentina Cross had learned to recognize danger in many forms. Cancer cells under a microscope, a child's labored breathing, a parent's desperate eyes in the hospital hallway. But nothing had prepared her to see Daniel Clinton step out of that town car. 3 years. 3 years since she'd disappeared from his life without explanation. 3 years since she'd carried his secret away with her. And now here he was, standing 20 feet from the swings where her children played, looking like he owned the world. Which technically he kind of did. "Elena, Marcus, come here please," Valentina called, her voice calm despite her racing heart. The twins looked up from their play, sensing something different in their mother's tone. Daniel's eyes followed her gaze to the children. She watched his face change. The confident businessman mask slipped for just a moment. His eyes widened. His mouth opened slightly. He was doing the math. "Valentina," his voice carried across the playground like a question and an accusation rolled into one. She walked toward him, placing herself between Daniel and her children. "You need to leave." "Those children." He stepped closer, his eyes darting past her to where Elena and Marcus stood by the swings, unsure whether to obey their mother or continue playing. "How old are they?" "That's none of your business." "The hell it isn't." Daniel's composure cracked. "They look exactly like... Valentina, how old are they?" "Mommy?" Elena's small voice cut through the tension. "Who is that man?" Valentina turned to her daughter, forcing a smile. "Just someone Mommy used to know, sweetheart. Keep playing for a minute, okay?" When she turned back to Daniel, his face had gone pale. 3 years, he whispered. "They're 3 years old." "You need to leave," Valentina repeated, her voice harder now. "Right now." "Like hell I'm leaving." Daniel stepped forward, and for the first time in years, Valentina saw the man beneath the expensive suit. The man who was used to getting answers when he demanded them. "If those are my children, your children?" Valentina's laugh was sharp, bitter. "You don't get to claim them now, Daniel. You gave up that right the morning I heard exactly what you thought of women like me." "What are you talking about?" "Oh, you don't remember. Let me refresh your memory." Valentina's voice dropped to a whisper, but every word hit like a slap. "Another bleeding heart, Dr. Thompson, they're all the same. Wave some charity money around and they'll do anything." Daniel's face went white. "Valentina, that wasn't what? Wasn't about me?" She crossed her arms, creating a barrier between them. "Funny, because it sure felt personal when I was standing in your bathroom, listening to you laugh about how easy it was to manipulate doctors who actually care about saving lives. You don't understand. That phone call, I understood perfectly." Valentina glanced back at her kids, making sure they were still playing safely. "I understood that I was just another conquest, another naive woman who fell for your act." Daniel ran a hand through his hair, frustration evident in every line of his body. "It wasn't an act, Valentina. What happened between us What happened between us was you using my passion for my work to get me into your bed." The words came out steady, controlled. Years of practice keeping her emotions in check during medical emergencies served her well now. And it worked, didn't it? Right up until I realized I was just another checkbox on your list. That's not true, isn't it? Valentina tilted her head, studying him like she would a particularly interesting case study. Tell me, Daniel, how many other bleeding heart doctors have you charmed over the years? How many other women have you convinced that you actually cared about their research, their dreams, their work? None. The word came out raw, desperate. There's been no one else like you. Right. Valentina's voice was flat, disbelieving. Because I'm sure you tell all the women that. Daniel stepped closer, and Valentina instinctively moved backward, keeping the distance between them. Valentina, listen to me. That phone call you heard, it wasn't about you. It was about Dr. Rebecca Matthews from Johns Hopkins. She'd been embezzling money from her research grants for months, and I was telling my security chief that we'd figured out her pattern. How convenient. A perfectly reasonable explanation that clears your conscience. It's the truth. Your truth. Valentina shook her head. But here's what I know about truth, Daniel. Truth is what I heard in your voice when you thought I couldn't hear you. Truth is the way you laughed when you said those words. Truth is that you never once tried to find me after I left. I tried for months. The words exploded out of him, loud enough that other parents in the park turned to look. Daniel lowered his voice, glancing around. I hired private investigators. I went to your apartment, your hospital, every place I could think of. You vanished completely. Because I had to. Valentina's voice broke slightly just for a moment before she regained control. Because I couldn't let you destroy me any more than you already had. Destroy you? Valentina, I was falling in love with you. The words hung in the air between them. Valentina stared at him, seeing the man she remembered from that night 3 years ago. The man who had held her like she was precious, who had listened to her dreams and made her believe they could come true. The man who had broken her heart so completely that she'd spent 3 years rebuilding herself from the pieces. No, she said quietly. You fell in love with the idea of me. The brilliant doctor who needed rescuing. The struggling resident who would be grateful for your help. You fell in love with your own power to save me. That's not, Mommy, I'm thirsty. Marcus appeared at Valentina's side, tugging on her jeans. His gray eyes, so much like Daniel's it was almost painful, looked up at her trustingly. Daniel's breath caught. Oh my God! Valentina knelt down to Marcus's level, blocking Daniel's view. There's a water fountain by the big slide, remember? Can you take Elena and get drinks for both of you? Okay, Mommy. Marcus nodded seriously, already turning to fetch his sister. When Valentina stood up, Daniel was staring at her with an expression she couldn't read. He has my eyes. He has gray eyes. Lots of people have gray eyes. Valentina, please. Daniel's voice was quieter now, almost pleading. If those are my children, I have a right to know them. Rights? Valentina's voice turned cold. You want to talk about rights? Where were your rights when I was throwing up every morning for 4 months while working 18-hour shifts? Where were your rights when I was in labor for 12 hours with no one to hold my hand? Where were your rights when I was walking the floor at 2 a.m. with 2 screaming babies and no idea how I was going to pay for formula? I didn't know. Because you didn't want to know. Valentina stepped closer to him, her voice dropping to barely above a whisper. You got what you wanted from me, and when I disappeared, you moved on, just like you always do. How can you say that? You don't know anything about what I've done since that night. I know enough. Valentina glanced around the park, suddenly aware that their conversation was drawing attention from other parents. I know that you're still the same man who thinks money can solve everything, the same man who shows up uninvited and expects people to rearrange their lives to accommodate your schedule. I'm not the same man I was 3 years ago. Prove it. The challenge hung between them. Prove it by getting back in your fancy car and leaving us alone. Daniel stared at her for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was steady, controlled. I can't do that, Valentina. If those children are mine, if? Valentina's laugh was sharp. Look at them, Daniel. Really look at them. They both turned toward the water fountain, where Elena and Marcus were taking turns drinking. Elena with her wild curls and determined expression, so much like Valentina but with Daniel's bone structure already emerging. Marcus with his serious gray eyes and careful way of making sure his sister got her turn first. "They're mine," Daniel said quietly. It wasn't a question anymore. "Biologically, yes." Valentina's voice was matter-of-fact. "In every way that actually matters? No. They don't know you exist, they've never needed you, and they're not going to start now. You can't just decide that I don't get to be their father. Watch me." Valentina turned to call her children. "Elena, Marcus, time to go." "Wait." Daniel caught her arm gently, carefully. "Please, just give me 5 minutes. Let me explain about that phone call. Let me tell you what really happened." Valentina looked down at his hand on her arm, then back up at his face. For just a moment, she saw something vulnerable there. Something that looked almost like the man she'd fallen for 3 years ago. Then she remembered the morning she'd left. The sound of his laughter, the casual cruelty in his voice when he thought no one was listening. 5 minutes won't change 3 years of silence, Daniel." She pulled her arm free. "And it won't change the fact that my daughters don't need a father who shows up when it's convenient for him." "But Valentina..." "No." The word came out final, absolute. "There are no buts here. There's just the life I built without you, and the peace my children have never had to question. And I won't let you take that away from them." Daniel watched her walk away, feeling like the ground had shifted beneath his feet. 3 years of searching. 3 years of wondering what had happened to the woman who'd made him believe in something he'd never thought possible. And now he knew. She was raising his children. His children. The words felt foreign in his mind, impossible and absolutely certain at the same time. "Valentina, wait!" He started after her, but she was already helping Elena and Marcus gather their things from the bench where they'd been playing. "We're leaving," Valentina said without looking at him. "Elena, put your backpack on. Marcus, where's your water bottle?" "But Mommy, I want to swing more," Elena protested, her voice carrying that particular whine that only 3-year-olds could perfect. "We'll come back tomorrow, sweetheart. Right now, we need to go home." Daniel stood there watching his daughter argue about leaving the playground, and the reality of it hit him like a physical blow. His daughter, the little girl with Valentina's stubborn chin and his own gray eyes, was his daughter. "You can't just walk away from this," he called after them. Valentina turned around, her arms protectively around both children. "Watch me. I'll find you again. I'm sure you will. You're good at that, aren't you? Finding people who don't want to be found?" Valentina's voice was calm, but there was steel underneath it. "But understand this, Daniel. Every time you show up uninvited, every time you disrupt their routine, every time you remind me why I left in the first place, you prove exactly why they're better off without you." She walked away then, each step deliberate and final. Elena skipped beside her, chattering about something Daniel couldn't hear. Marcus walked more carefully, glancing back once at the strange man who'd upset his mother. Daniel stood alone in the playground, surrounded by the sounds of other families enjoying their afternoon, and felt more isolated than he had since the night Valentina disappeared. His phone buzzed. A text from his assistant about a board meeting he was supposed to be leading right now. Another about a merger that needed his immediate attention. A third about some crisis that apparently only he could solve. But all Daniel could think about were those gray eyes. Marcus's eyes, his son's eyes. He'd been a father for 3 years and never knew it. The drive back to his office passed in a blur. Daniel sat in the back of the town car, staring out the window without seeing anything. His driver, Robert, had been with him for years and knew better than to make conversation when Daniel was in this kind of mood. But this wasn't just a bad mood. This was his entire world tilting on its axis. "Sir?" Robert's voice came through the intercom. "We're here." Daniel looked up to find they were parked outside the sleek glass building that housed Clinton Industries. 43 floors of steel and ambition, built on the foundation his father had laid, and the empire Daniel had expanded beyond anyone's expectations. None of it mattered now. Cancel my afternoon meetings? Daniel said as he stepped out of the car. Sir, the board meeting, cancel it. Reschedule everything for tomorrow. Robert nodded, though Daniel could see the concern in his eyes. In 5 years of working together, Daniel had never canceled a board meeting. Never put his personal life ahead of business, mostly because he'd never had a personal life worth putting first. The elevator ride to the top floor felt endless. Daniel stared at his reflection in the polished steel doors, seeing his father's jaw, his mother's eyes, features that were apparently strong enough to show up in the next generation. His children. God, he had children. The elevator opened into his office, a sprawling space with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Central Park. On clear days, he could almost see the playground where he'd just discovered his entire life had changed. Mr. Clinton. His assistant Jennifer appeared at his desk with a stack of papers. The Morrison account needs your signature, and legal is waiting for your review of the Henderson contracts. Not now, Jen. Sir, these are time-sensitive. I said not now. Daniel's voice was sharper than intended. Jennifer stepped back, clearly startled by his tone. Daniel ran a hand through his hair, trying to center himself. I'm sorry. Just hold my calls for the rest of the day. Tell everyone I'm unavailable. Jennifer nodded and retreated, leaving Daniel alone with his thoughts and the view of a city that suddenly felt completely different. He walked to the windows, pressing his palms against the cool glass. Somewhere out there, Valentina was probably making dinner for their children, reading them stories, tucking them into bed, all the things he'd missed, all the moments he'd never get back, because she'd heard a phone conversation and assumed the worst. Or had she? Daniel closed his eyes, forcing himself to remember that morning 3 years ago. He'd been in his bathroom, getting ready for a meeting, when his head of security had called about Dr. Rebecca Matthews, the Johns Hopkins researcher who'd been embezzling grant money, using the funds for personal expenses while her research subjects went without proper care. He'd been angry, disgusted. The conversation had been heated, full of his frustration at being taken advantage of by someone he'd trusted to do good work. Another bleeding heart, Dr. Thompson. They're all the same. Wave some charity money around and they'll do anything. The words came back to him now, and Daniel felt sick. If Valentina had been in the bathroom, if she'd heard those words without context, she would have thought he was talking about her, about their night together, about the research funding he'd offered. Damn it. Daniel pressed his forehead against the window. How could he have been so careless? How could he not have realized she might overhear? But more than that, how could he not have fought harder to find her when she disappeared? He'd hired investigators, yes, but when they'd come up empty, he'd eventually accepted that she didn't want to be found. He'd told himself she'd made her choice. He'd never considered that her choice had been based on a misunderstanding that destroyed everything they might have had. His phone rang. Daniel glanced at the caller ID and considered letting it go to voicemail, but his sister Sarah's voice came through the speaker before he could decide. Danny? Are you there? Your assistant said you canceled all your meetings. Are you sick? Daniel had been 12 when their parents died, Sarah only 8. He'd spent the next 10 years raising her while building the company, making sure she had everything she needed while learning to be both brother and guardian. She was 26 now, married to a good man, with a baby on the way. But she still worried about him like he'd worried about her all those years. I'm fine, Sarah. You're lying. I can hear it in your voice. What's wrong? Daniel stared out at the city, wondering how to explain that everything he thought he knew about his life had just been turned upside down. I found her. Found who? Valentina, the woman from 3 years ago. There was silence on the other end of the line. Sarah was the only person who knew about that night, about how Daniel had searched for Valentina afterward, about how her disappearance had affected him. Where? Sarah's voice was careful. A playground in Riverside Park. She was there with her children. Her children? My children? The words felt strange in his mouth. Twins, a boy and a girl. They're 3 years old, Sarah. Another silence. Then, oh my God, Danny. She heard something that night, a phone conversation I was having about the Matthews situation. She thought I was talking about her, thought I was just using her for. Daniel couldn't finish the sentence. And she's been raising her children alone for 3 years. She doesn't want me anywhere near them. She thinks I'm the same manipulative bastard who broke her trust. And maybe she's right. Maybe she's not. Sarah's voice was firm. Danny, you are not the same man you were 3 years ago. Hell, you're not even the same man you were 6 months ago. She was right, though Daniel wasn't sure it mattered. The work he'd done, the changes he'd made, the foundation he'd built in Elena's memory. None of it would mean anything to Valentina if she couldn't see past that morning 3 years ago. What are you going to do? Sarah asked. Daniel watched the sun begin to set over Manhattan, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. Somewhere in this city, his children were probably getting ready for dinner, probably asking their mother about the strange man in the park who'd made her upset. I don't know, he said honestly, but I can't just pretend this didn't happen. I can't pretend I don't have children who need to know where they came from. Even if their mother doesn't want you in their lives. Especially then. Daniel's voice hardened with resolve. Those children deserve to know their father, and Valentina deserves to know the truth about what really happened that morning. Just be careful, Danny. Don't let your need to fix this hurt them more than your absence already has. After Sarah hung up, Daniel stood alone in his office as darkness fell over the city. He thought about Valentina's face when she'd seen him today. The way she'd immediately put herself between him and the children. The fierce protectiveness in her voice when she'd told him to leave. She was protecting them from him. From the man she thought he was. But what if he could show her the man he'd become? Daniel picked up his phone and scrolled through his contacts until he found the number he was looking for. Dr. James Morrison, Chief of Pediatric Oncology at Mount Sinai. The man who'd been Valentina's mentor during her residency. The same man whose research Daniel had been quietly funding for the past 2 years. It was time to make some calls. Time to find out exactly where Dr. Valentina Cross was working now, and what it would take to prove to her that some people really could change, even if they had to fight for the chance to prove it. The next morning, Valentina sat in her small kitchen watching Elena and Marcus eat their breakfast, trying to pretend her world hadn't shifted completely off its axis. The twins chattered about returning to the playground, oblivious to the storm their mother was weathering internally. Can we go back to the park today, Mommy? Elena asked around a mouthful of cereal. I want to try the monkey bars again. We'll see, sweetheart. Valentina forced a smile, though her mind was already working through alternatives. Different parks, different routines, anything to avoid another unexpected encounter. Her phone buzzed with a text from Maya, her closest friend since medical school. Coffee this morning? You sounded stressed last night. Valentina had called Maya after putting the twins to bed, needing to tell someone about Daniel's sudden reappearance. Maya had listened without judgment, offered to watch the children, and promised to bring coffee strong enough to wake the dead. Aunt Maya's coming over, Valentina told the twins, who immediately perked up. Maya spoiled them shamelessly, bringing books and art supplies and the kind of patient attention that made her their favorite non-parent person in the world. 20 minutes later, Maya arrived with 2 large coffee cups and the no-nonsense expression she wore when she was ready to fix someone's life. Okay, Maya said, settling the twins in the living room with coloring books and crayons. Tell me everything again. Slowly this time. Valentina wrapped her hands around her coffee cup, using the warmth to steady herself. He just showed up, Maya. 3 years of silence, and he shows up at our park like he has every right to be there. Did he say why? How he found you? He didn't get the chance. I told him to leave before he could start making excuses or demands. Valentina paused, but he saw them. He looked at Elena and Marcus and he knew. Well, Marcus does have his eyes. That's what Daniel said. Valentina's voice was bitter. Like that gives him some claim to them. Maya studied her friend's face. What did he say about that night? About why you left? He tried to explain the phone call. Said it wasn't about me, that it was about some other doctor who was embezzling funds. Valentina shook her head. Same charming Daniel spinning stories to get what he wants. What if it wasn't a story? Maya. I'm serious. What if you misunderstood what you heard? Valentina set down her coffee cup harder than necessary. I know what I heard. I know how he laughed when he said it. I know that the man I thought I was falling for was just another rich guy who sees women like me as entertainment. But what if? There is no what if. Valentina's voice was firm. Even if that call wasn't about me, it doesn't change anything else. It doesn't change the fact that he never really tried to find me. It doesn't change the fact that he spent 3 years living his life without a thought for what happened to me. Maya was quiet for a moment, watching Elena help Marcus choose the right crayon color. They're good kids, Val. Happy, well-adjusted. You've done an amazing job raising them alone. Thank you. But they're going to start asking questions soon, about their father, about why they don't have one when their friends do. Valentina had been dreading this conversation. They're only 3. Marcus asked me last week why some kids have daddies and he doesn't. The words hit Valentina like a punch to the chest. What did you tell him? I told him that families come in all different shapes and that his family with you was perfect just the way it was. Maya leaned forward. But he's a smart kid, Val. They both are. Eventually they're going to want more than reassurance. They're going to want answers. I'll deal with that when it happens. Will you? Because it sounds like Daniel Clinton isn't going away quietly. As if summoned by their conversation, Valentina's phone rang. The number was unknown, but something in her gut told her exactly who it was. Don't answer it, Maya said, seeing her friend's face. But Valentina was already swiping to accept the call. Hello? Valentina, it's Daniel. Please don't hang up. How did you get this number? It doesn't matter. What matters is that we need to talk. Really talk, without the children around, without interruptions. I told you yesterday. You told me to leave you alone, but I can't do that. Not now that I know Elena and Marcus exist. Valentina felt her chest tighten at hearing him say their names. You don't get to use their names like you know them. You're right. I don't know them, but I want to. God, Valentina, I want to know everything about them. What they like, what makes them laugh, what their favorite stories are. They like art projects and playground swings and the books about dragons that Maya reads to them, Valentina said before she could stop herself. Elena is fearless and stubborn, and Marcus is gentle and thoughtful, and they are perfect exactly as they are. They sound incredible. They are, and they don't need you to disrupt their lives. Daniel was quiet for a moment. When he spoke again, his voice was careful, controlled. Have dinner with me tonight. One conversation. Let me explain what really happened that morning. I don't need explanations, Daniel. Yes, you do. Because right now you hate me based on something that isn't true. And maybe after I tell you the real story, you'll still hate me. Maybe you'll still want me out of your life. But at least it'll be based on facts instead of misunderstandings. Valentina looked across the room at her children, completely absorbed in their coloring. One dinner won't change 3 years. Maybe not. But it might change the next 30. The words hung in the air between them. Valentina closed her eyes, feeling the weight of a decision she wasn't ready to make. 1 hour, she heard herself say. 1 conversation. And then you leave us alone. Deal. 7 o'clock. I'll text you the address. Somewhere public. Somewhere normal, not some 5-star restaurant where you can try to impress me with how much money you have. There's a diner on 47th Street. Mel's. Do you know it? Valentina almost smiled despite herself. She'd eaten at Mel's during her residency, when it was the only place she could afford that stayed open late enough for her schedule. I know it. 7 o'clock then. After she hung up, Maya was staring at her with raised eyebrows. That sounded like you just agreed to have dinner with him. 1 conversation, that's all. Val, I need to hear what he has to say, Maya. Not because I believe him, but because... Valentina paused, trying to find the words. Because someday Elena and Marcus are going to ask about their father. And when they do, I want to be able to tell them I gave him every opportunity to prove he was worth knowing. And if he isn't, then at least I'll know for sure. Maya nodded slowly. I'll watch the kids tonight, but Val, please be careful. I know you think you're over what happened between you two, but the way your voice changes when you talk about him. My voice doesn't change. It gets softer, more vulnerable, like some part of you is still that woman who fell for him 3 years ago. Valentina wanted to deny it, but the words wouldn't come, because Maya was right. 3 years of building walls, of convincing herself she was better off alone, and 5 minutes with Daniel had reminded her exactly why those walls had been necessary in the first place. The rest of the day passed in a blur of routine activities that felt anything but routine. Valentina took the twins to a different park, one across town where she was certain Daniel wouldn't think to look. She helped them with art projects, read them stories, and gave them her full attention while her mind raced with questions about the evening ahead. By 6:30, she was standing in front of her closet, staring at clothes that suddenly felt inadequate. Not because she wanted to impress Daniel, but because she needed armor for what promised to be the most difficult conversation of her life. "Wear the blue dress," Maya called from the living room, where she was helping the twins build a fort out of couch cushions. "The one that makes you look like the badass doctor you are." Valentina pulled out the dress in question. Navy blue, simple but elegant, professional enough to remind both of them that she wasn't the struggling resident she'd been 3 years ago. She was Dr. Valentina Cross now. She had her own research program, her own funding, her own life that she'd built from nothing, and she wasn't about to let Daniel Clinton make her forget any of that. At 7 o'clock exactly, Valentina walked into Mel's diner to find Daniel already waiting in a corner booth. He'd traded his expensive suit for dark jeans and a button-down shirt, but somehow he still managed to look out of place among the vinyl seats and fluorescent lighting. He stood when he saw her, and for a moment they just looked at each other across the worn linoleum floor. "Thank you for coming," he said as she slid into the seat across from him. "1 hour," Valentina reminded him. "That's all you get." Daniel nodded, signaling the waitress for coffee. 1 hour to explain 3 years of misunderstanding. 1 hour to try to convince me that what I heard with my own ears wasn't real. 1 hour to tell you the truth, Daniel said quietly. And then you can decide for yourself what's real and what isn't. Valentina wrapped her hands around her coffee cup and waited. After 3 years of wondering, 3 years of assuming the worst, she was finally going to hear Daniel Clinton's side of the story. Whether she believed it or not remained to be seen. Daniel stared into his coffee for a moment before speaking, as if gathering the courage for words he'd been practicing for 3 years. "Dr. Rebecca Matthews," he began. "Johns Hopkins, pediatric oncology researcher who'd been receiving grants from my foundation for 18 months. Valentina kept her expression neutral. "I'm listening." She was brilliant. Her research on targeted therapy for childhood leukemia was exactly the kind of work I wanted to fund. Revolutionary stuff that could save thousands of kids. Daniel's jaw tightened. "Or so I thought." The waitress refilled their coffee cups, and Daniel waited until she was gone before continuing. "My head of security, Thompson, had been investigating some irregularities in her expense reports. Nothing major at first. A few dinners that seemed expensive, travel costs that didn't match up with conference schedules." Daniel looked up at Valentina. "But when you're talking about research that could save children's lives, you want to give people the benefit of the doubt." "But there was no doubt, was there?" Valentina's voice was carefully controlled. "Thompson called me that morning with the final report. Matthews had been embezzling from her research grants for over a year, using the money for personal expenses while her research subjects went without proper care. Kids who were counting on her work, who needed those medications, and she was buying designer handbags with their hope." Daniel's voice grew harder with each word. "She'd stolen nearly $200,000, Valentina. Money that was supposed to save children's lives." Valentina felt something cold settle in her stomach, but she refused to let it show on her face. "And that's when you made your comment about bleeding heart doctors." I was furious, disgusted. Here was someone I'd trusted, someone who'd convinced me she cared about the same things I cared about, and she'd been lying to my face for months. Daniel leaned forward. "When I said those words, I wasn't talking about doctors in general. I was talking about one specific doctor who'd betrayed everything we were trying to accomplish. How convenient. It's the truth. Daniel pulled out his phone, scrolling through old messages. Here, Thompson's report, dated the same morning you left. All the evidence about Matthews's embezzlement. Valentina glanced at the phone screen but didn't take it. You could have fabricated that. I could have. But why would I? What would be the point of lying to you now? To get access to your children. Daniel set his phone on the table between them. Valentina, if I just wanted access to Elena and Marcus, I have lawyers who could make that happen. I have money and resources and connections that could force a custody arrangement whether you wanted one or not. The casual way he said it sent a chill through Valentina. Is that a threat? No, it's the opposite of a threat. Daniel's voice was steady, intense. It's me telling you that I don't want to force anything. I don't want to use my money or my lawyers or my power to get what I want. I want to earn it. Why? Because the last time I tried to solve a problem with money and influence instead of patience and understanding, I lost the most important thing that ever happened to me. Valentina felt her carefully constructed walls waver slightly. You're talking about me. I'm talking about us, about the night that changed everything for me, and the morning when I was too stupid and too careless to realize what I was about to lose. The diner was filling up with the dinner crowd, families and couples, and people grabbing a quick meal after work. Normal people living normal lives, while Valentina sat across from the father of her children and tried to decide whether 3 years of anger was based on truth or misunderstanding. Even if that phone call wasn't about me, she said slowly, it doesn't change the fact that you never really looked for me. I looked for you for 8 months, Valentina. 8 months of private investigators and sleepless nights and calling in every favor I had. Daniel's voice was raw. I went to Mount Sinai so many times that security started recognizing me. I talked to Dr. Morrison, to your friends, to anyone who might know where you'd gone. Maya never mentioned, because I never found Maya. You disappeared so completely that even your closest friends didn't know where you were. Valentina thought back to those early months, when she'd been so terrified of Daniel finding her that she'd cut contact with almost everyone from her old life. She'd changed her phone number, moved to a different apartment, even transferred to a different hospital system. Why did you stop looking? Daniel was quiet for a long moment. Because my lawyer told me something that changed my perspective entirely. What? He said that when someone disappears that completely, that deliberately, it's because they're running from something or someone. Daniel met her eyes. He said that maybe instead of trying to find you, I should be asking myself what I'd done to make you feel like you needed to run. The words hit Valentina like a physical blow. She'd expected excuses, justifications, maybe even anger. She hadn't expected self-reflection. So I stopped looking for you, Daniel continued. And I started looking at myself. Really looking for the first time in my life. And what did you see? A man who was so used to getting what he wanted that he'd forgotten how to earn what he needed. Daniel's smile was bitter. A man who threw money at problems instead of actually solving them, who used his wealth as a shortcut to trust and respect and connection. Valentina wanted to argue, to tell him he was still that man. But something in his voice, something in the way he sat in this ordinary diner wearing ordinary clothes, made her pause. If this story didn't see that coming, hit the like button so I know you're enjoying the drama, she thought to herself, remembering the kinds of moments that kept viewers engaged. But this wasn't a story. This was her life, sitting across from her in a diner booth, asking for something she wasn't sure she could give. What changed? She asked. Everything. Daniel pulled out his wallet and extracted a small photograph. He placed it on the table between them, and Valentina saw a hospital room with children in it, the Elena Memorial Wing at Children's Hospital of Philadelphia. Valentina looked closer at the photo. It showed a bright, cheerful space filled with play areas and comfortable furniture. But what caught her attention were the medical equipment and the small patients visible in the background. I built it 18 months ago, Daniel said. a research facility specifically focused on developing less toxic treatments for childhood cancers. Everything we talked about that night, everything you dreamed of accomplishing, it's happening there. You built a hospital wing? I built a legacy. For Elena, yes, but also for every conversation we had about changing how we treat sick children. Daniel's voice was quiet, intense. Every day, researchers there are working on the kind of targeted therapies you described. The treatments that could save kids without poisoning them first. Valentina stared at the photograph, her mind racing. Why are you showing me this? Because I want you to understand who I became after you left. The work I've been doing, the changes I've made, they all started with that night we spent talking about your research. You're trying to impress me. I'm trying to show you that some people can change. That losing you taught me things about myself I never would have learned otherwise. Daniel put the photograph back in his wallet. Dr. Morrison has been consulting on the project for the past year. He speaks very highly of your current research, by the way. Valentina's head snapped up. You've been talking to Morrison about me? No. I've been talking to Morrison about pediatric oncology research. Your name came up because you are apparently doing groundbreaking work in exactly the field I've been funding. You've been checking up on me. I've been working in the same field you're passionate about. It would be impossible not to hear about Dr. Valentina Cross and her innovative approaches to childhood cancer treatment. Valentina felt exposed, vulnerable in a way she hadn't expected. For 3 years, she'd been building her career, establishing herself as a researcher worth knowing. She'd never considered that her work might be intersecting with Daniel's world. The foundation offered you a grant last year, Daniel continued. Through the standard application process, you turned it down. I turned down a lot of grants. I was being selective about my funding sources. You turned it down because it was from me. It wasn't a question, and Valentina didn't deny it. When she'd seen the Clinton Foundation letterhead, she'd rejected the offer without reading the details. She'd told herself it was about maintaining her independence. But the truth was simpler and more painful. She hadn't been ready to accept anything from the man who'd broken her heart. I couldn't take money from you, she said quietly, even if it meant advancing your research, even if it could help save children's lives. Especially then. Valentina met his eyes. Because I couldn't let you buy your way back into my life. I wasn't trying to buy my way back. I was trying to fund important research. The fact that you were doing it was... Daniel paused. It felt like fate. I don't believe in fate. Neither did I. But then I found you again yesterday, and you were raising our children, and every wall I'd built around my heart for the past 3 years came crashing down. The words hung between them, honest and raw and impossible to ignore. Valentina felt her own walls wavering. Felt the careful distance she'd maintained starting to crack. Daniel, I know you don't trust me. I know you have every reason to believe I'm still the same selfish bastard who hurt you 3 years ago. Daniel leaned across the table. But give me a chance to prove I've changed. Not for me, but for Elena and Marcus. They deserve to know who their father really is, not who you think I am based on one terrible misunderstanding. And what if who you really are isn't someone I want in their lives? Then I'll walk away. I'll set up college funds for them and leave you alone to raise them however you think is best. Daniel's voice was steady, certain. But Valentina, what if who I really am is someone worth knowing? What if these 3 years apart taught us both things we needed to learn? Valentina looked around the diner, at the ordinary people living their ordinary lives, and wondered when her life had become so complicated. 3 years ago, she'd been a struggling resident with simple dreams. Now she was a successful researcher, a mother, and a woman faced with an impossible choice. Trust the man who'd broken her heart, or protect the life she'd built without him. Either way, nothing would ever be the same. I need to see it, Valentina said suddenly. Daniel looked confused. See what? The hospital wing, the Elena Memorial Wing. Valentina's voice was steady, but her hands trembled slightly around her coffee cup. If you're telling the truth about who you've become, I need to see the proof. Valentina, you don't have to. Yes, I do. She leaned forward, her eyes intense. You can tell me stories about change, show me photographs, quote my former mentor. But if you want me to believe that you're not the same man who broke my trust 3 years ago, I need to see the work. I need to talk to the researchers. I need proof that this isn't just another manipulation. Daniel studied her face for a moment, then nodded. Okay, when? This weekend, Saturday morning. Valentina was already thinking through logistics. Maya can watch Elena and Marcus, but I go alone, Daniel. No children, no pressure, just me evaluating whether the man you claim to be is someone I want in my children's lives. Agreed. Daniel pulled out his phone. I'll call Dr. Sarah Mitchell, the Wings director. She can walk you through everything, show you the research, explain exactly what we're doing there. You won't be there? Not unless you want me to be. This isn't about impressing you, Valentina. This is about you seeing the truth for yourself. Something in his tone made her believe him, which was almost more terrifying than the anger she'd been carrying for 3 years. Anger was simple, clean. This growing uncertainty was much more dangerous. I should go, Valentina said, reaching for her purse. Maya's watching the twins, and they'll be getting ready for bed soon. Wait. Daniel's hand moved toward hers, then stopped just short of touching. Can I ask you something first? Valentina nodded warily. That night, 3 years ago, when we talked about your research, about changing how we treat childhood cancer. Daniel's voice was careful. Did any part of that feel real to you? Not the funding offer, not the professional aspects, but the connection we had, the way we understood each other. Valentina was quiet for so long that Daniel started to think she wouldn't answer. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. It felt like the most real thing that had ever happened to me. For me, too. Which is why it hurt so much when I thought it was all a lie. Daniel closed his eyes briefly. I'm so sorry, Valentina. Sorry that my carelessness with words cost us 3 years. Sorry that you had to go through pregnancy and childbirth and raising twins alone because I was too thoughtless to make sure you understood what that phone call was really about. And I'm sorry I didn't give you a chance to explain. The admission cost her. I was so terrified of being hurt again that I assumed the worst and ran instead of fighting for what we might have had. They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of 3 years of missed opportunities hanging between them. Saturday morning, Valentina said finally. Children's Hospital of Philadelphia. I'll be there at 9. I'll let Dr. Mitchell know to expect you. Valentina stood to leave, then paused. Daniel, if this is another game, if you're trying to manipulate me into letting you into their lives. It's not a game, Valentina. I swear on Elena's memory, it's not a game. The drive home passed in a blur of conflicting emotions. By the time Valentina reached her apartment, she felt emotionally exhausted and more confused than she'd been since the day she'd discovered she was pregnant. How did it go? Maya asked as soon as Valentina walked through the door. The twins were already in their pajamas, clean and sleepy from their baths. I don't know. Valentina sank onto the couch next to Marcus, who immediately curled up against her side. He had explanations for everything. The phone call, why he stopped looking for me, what he's been doing for the past 3 years. Did you believe him? That's the problem. Part of me did. Valentina stroked Marcus's hair, marveling at how much he looked like his father. He's built a hospital wing, Maya. For childhood cancer research. Everything we talked about that night. Everything I dreamed of doing. He's actually made it happen. That's actually pretty incredible. Or it's an elaborate way to get back into my life. Valentina looked at her friend. How am I supposed to know the difference? You go see it for yourself. You talk to the people working there. You trust your instincts. Maya settled into the chair across from them. Val, you're one of the smartest people I know. If this is manipulation, you'll figure it out. And if it's real, then I've been wrong about him for 3 years. If it's real, then I've deprived my children of their father because I was too proud. and too scared to ask for the whole truth. "Mama?" Elena appeared in the doorway, rubbing her eyes. "I can't sleep. I keep thinking about the man at the park." Valentina's heart sank. "What about him, sweetheart?" Elena climbed onto the couch, snuggling between her mother and brother. He looked sad, like when Marcus cries, but grown-up sad. "Why do you think he was sad?" Maya asked gently. "Because Mama was mad at him, and because—" Elena paused, thinking hard. "Because he looked at us like he wanted to know us but didn't know how." Out of the mouths of babes, Valentina felt her throat tighten at her daughter's intuitive assessment of the situation. "Should we know him, Mama?" Marcus asked, his voice sleepy but curious. "Is he nice?" "I don't know yet, baby. Mama needs to figure that out first." "But if he's nice, maybe he could read us stories," Elena said hopefully. "Like Aunt Maya does." Valentina met Maya's knowing look over the twins' heads. Her children's innocent questions were forcing her to confront the reality she'd been avoiding. Elena and Marcus were growing up without a father, and they were starting to notice that absence. "We'll see," Valentina said, the words feeling inadequate. "Right now, it's time for little ones to get some sleep." After tucking the twins into their beds and kissing them goodnight, Valentina returned to the living room to find Maya making tea. "They like him," Maya observed. "Or at least they're curious about him. They're 3 years old. They'd be curious about anyone who paid attention to them." "Maybe, or maybe they recognize something in him that you're not ready to see yet." Valentina accepted the tea gratefully, wrapping her hands around the warm mug. "What if I'm making a mistake, Maya? What if I let him into their lives and he hurts them? What if he decides being a father is too complicated and disappears again?" "What if he doesn't? What if he's exactly the father they need? That's a hell of a risk to take with my children's hearts. Isn't it a bigger risk not to take it?" Maya settled next to her friend on the couch. "Val, you've spent 3 years building walls to protect yourself and the twins. But walls that keep people out also keep people in. At some point, you have to decide whether the protection is worth the isolation." Valentina knew her friend was right, but knowing and accepting were two different things. She'd been hurt so deeply by Daniel's apparent betrayal that the thought of trusting him again felt like standing on the edge of a cliff. But Saturday morning she would see the Elena Memorial Wing for herself. She would talk to the researchers, evaluate the work, and try to determine whether Daniel Clinton had truly changed, or whether he was still the master manipulator she'd believed him to be. Either way, she would finally have the truth she needed to make the right decision for her children's future. Comment below? She found herself thinking in the strange way trauma sometimes made your mind work. Do you think Valentina should give Daniel a chance to prove he's changed? Or is protecting her children's peace more important? But this wasn't a story with clear answers and satisfying resolutions. This was real life, messy and complicated and full of impossible choices. On Saturday morning, she would take the first step toward finding out which choice was right. The rest of the week passed in a strange, suspended animation. Valentina went through the motions of her daily routine: work, research, caring for the twins, while her mind remained focused on Saturday morning and the hospital wing that would either vindicate Daniel's claims or expose them as lies. Thursday evening, as she was putting the twins to bed, Elena asked the question Valentina had been dreading. "Mama, why don't we have a daddy?" Valentina sat on the edge of Elena's bed, choosing her words carefully. Some families have mommies and daddies. Some have just mommies or just daddies. Some have grandparents or aunts and uncles. What matters isn't what kind of family you have, but how much love is in it. "But do we have a daddy somewhere?" Marcus asked from his bed across the room. "You do have a father," Valentina said slowly. "But he doesn't live with us. Why not?" "Because sometimes grown-ups make mistakes, and those mistakes can keep families apart." "Did you make a mistake, Mama?" The question pierced her heart. "I might have, sweetheart. I'm trying to figure that out." "If you made a mistake, can you fix it?" "I'm going to try." Saturday morning arrived gray and drizzling, matching Valentina's uncertain mood. She took the train to Philadelphia, using the 2-hour journey to prepare herself for whatever she might find at Children's Hospital. The Elena Memorial Wing was everything Daniel had promised, and more. Dr. Sarah Mitchell, a warm woman in her 40s, with kind eyes and genuine passion for her work, met Valentina at the entrance. "Dr. Cross, I'm so excited to meet you," Dr. Mitchell said, shaking Valentina's hand enthusiastically. "Your research on targeted therapy protocols is brilliant. We've been following your work closely." "Thank you. I understand this facility focuses on similar research? Come, let me show you." The tour that followed left Valentina speechless. The Elena Memorial Wing was a state-of-the-art research facility that seamlessly combined cutting-edge medical equipment with a child-friendly environment. The patient rooms were bright and cheerful, designed to feel more like bedrooms than hospital spaces. The research labs were equipped with technology she'd only dreamed of having access to. But it was the philosophy behind the facility that truly impressed her. Every aspect of the wing was designed around the principle that children deserve treatment that healed without causing unnecessary suffering. "Mr. Clinton was very specific about our mission," Dr. Mitchell explained as they walked through the research labs. "He said he wanted to create a place where the cure wasn't worse than the disease, where families could have hope without sacrificing their children's quality of life." "How long have you been working here?" Valentina asked. "Since the wing opened 18 months ago. Before that, I was at Johns Hopkins getting frustrated by the limitations of traditional treatment protocols." Dr. Mitchell's passion was evident in every word. "This place has allowed me to pursue research that was impossible elsewhere." They paused in front of a wall of photographs showing children in various stages of treatment and recovery. Happy faces, families celebrating remission, children playing despite their illnesses. "These are our success stories," Dr. Mitchell said. "Kids who might not have made it with conventional treatments, but who are thriving with the targeted therapies we've developed here." "And Mr. Clinton is involved in the day-to-day operations?" "He visits regularly, meets with the research teams, reviews our progress reports, but he's very hands-off about the actual science. He trusts us to do our jobs and provides whatever resources we need." Dr. Mitchell paused. "I've worked for a lot of wealthy benefactors over the years, Dr. Cross. Most of them want their names on buildings and their egos stroked. Mr. Clinton is different. He genuinely cares about the work itself, not the recognition." By the end of the tour, Valentina felt emotionally overwhelmed. The Elena Memorial Wing was everything she'd dreamed of creating, everything she'd talked about with Daniel that night 3 years ago. And it was real, functioning, saving children's lives every day. "Dr. Cross?" Dr. Mitchell looked at her with concern. "Are you all right? You look pale." "I'm fine, just processing everything." Valentina took a deep breath. "This is remarkable work you're doing here. Would you like to join us? We have a position opening up for a senior researcher. Your expertise would be invaluable to our team." The offer hung in the air between them. Everything Valentina had worked toward, everything she'd dreamed of achieving, was being handed to her on a silver platter. By a man she'd spent 3 years hating for reasons that might not even be true. "I'll need some time to think about it," Valentina said finally. "Of course. Take all the time you need." As Valentina rode the train back to New York, she stared out the window at the passing landscape and tried to process what she'd learned. Daniel hadn't just built a hospital wing for show. He'd created something meaningful, something that was making a real difference in children's lives, something that proved he'd become the man she'd hoped he could be 3 years ago. The question now was whether she was brave enough to trust him with her children's hearts, and with her own. The subway ride from Penn Station back to her apartment felt like a journey between 2 different worlds. 3 hours ago, Valentina had been standing in a research facility that represented everything she'd ever dreamed of achieving. Now she was returning to the small but safe life she'd built for herself and her children. Her phone buzzed as the train pulled into her station. A text from Daniel. "How did it go?" "Dr. Mitchell said you seemed impressed but overwhelmed." Valentina stared at the message for a long moment before responding. "We need to talk, all 3 of us." All three of us? You, me, and the truth? No more dancing around what happened? No more half conversations in diners? Valentina took a deep breath before typing the next part. The twins are spending tomorrow afternoon with Maya. Meet me at the park where you found us. 2 o'clock. I'll be there. Sunday afternoon arrived crisp and clear, autumn painting the trees in brilliant shades of gold and red. Valentina arrived at the playground early, sitting on the same bench where she'd watched her children play just a week ago, before Daniel had reappeared and turned her carefully ordered world upside down. She saw him approaching from across the park, walking with that same confident stride, but somehow looking less intimidating in jeans and a sweater than he had in his expensive suits. He learned to dress like a normal person, she noticed. One more small change in a growing list of transformations. Thank you for coming, Daniel said, settling on the bench beside her but maintaining careful distance. I saw the wing, Valentina said without preamble. It's everything you said it would be. Everything we talked about that night. Dr. Mitchell said you were offered a position. Senior researcher, dream job, everything I've worked toward for the past 3 years. Valentina turned to face him. Convenient timing, don't you think? Daniel's expression was carefully neutral. You think I orchestrated that offer to manipulate you into giving me access to the children? Did you? No. The word was simple, direct. Dr. Mitchell has wanted to recruit you for months. She's been following your research, impressed by your publications. The timing is coincidental, not calculated. Valentina studied his face, looking for signs of deception. After 3 years of hating him, she'd forgotten how expressive his eyes could be. Right now, they showed nothing but honesty and a vulnerability that made her chest tighten. I want to believe you, she said quietly. But trusting you cost me everything once before. I can't afford to be wrong again. Daniel was quiet for a moment, watching a young father push his daughter on the swings. What would it take for you to trust me again? What would I have to do to prove that I'm not the man you think I am? I don't know if that's possible. Because of what happened 3 years ago? Or because of what's happened since? Valentina considered the question. Both. Because you hurt me then, and because I've spent 3 years building a life that doesn't need you. Elena and Marcus are happy, Daniel. They're healthy and loved, and they don't know what they're missing. But they're starting to ask questions. You told me they are. The observation stung because it was true. They're 3 years old. They're curious about everything. They're curious about their father specifically, about why they don't have what other kids have. Daniel shifted on the bench, turning to face her more directly. Valentina, I'm not here to disrupt their happiness. I'm here because I want to add to it. And what if your idea of adding to their happiness involves taking them away from the life they know? What if you decide you want custody, or that they should live in your world instead of mine? Then you don't know me at all. The certainty in his voice caught her off guard. Explain. Those children belong with you. You're their mother. You've raised them. You've given them everything they need to become amazing human beings. Daniel's voice was steady, certain. I don't want to take them away from you, Valentina. I want to learn how to be part of what you've already built. Even if it means spending time in playgrounds instead of boardrooms. Even if it means picture books instead of business deals. Especially then. Daniel smiled, and for the first time since he'd reappeared in her life, it looked completely genuine. Do you know what I thought about every night for the past 3 years? Not the deals I'd closed or the money I'd made. I thought about you. About the way you lit up when you talked about helping sick children. About how you made me believe I could be better than I was. Valentina felt her carefully constructed defenses beginning to crack. Daniel, I know I hurt you. I know I broke your trust in the most devastating way possible. But I also know that what we had that night was real, and what we created together is more important than my mistakes. What we created together is 2 children who deserve stability, not a father who might decide being a parent is too complicated. You're right. They deserve stability. Daniel reached into his jacket and pulled out a manila envelope. Which is why I had my lawyers draw up these papers. Valentina's heart stopped. Custody papers? Legal documents renouncing any claim to custody or visitation rights without your explicit consent. Daniel held out the envelope. I'm not here to take anything from you, Valentina. I'm here to ask permission to be part of their lives on whatever terms you're comfortable with. Valentina stared at the envelope, afraid to touch it. You're giving up your parental rights? I'm putting their well-being ahead of my rights. There's a difference. Daniel set the envelope on the bench between them. Read them when you're ready. Take them to your own lawyer if you want. But understand what they mean. I can't take the children away from you. Ever. Even if we can't work things out between us. Why would you do that? Because 3 years ago I lost the most important thing in my life because I was careless with your trust. I won't make that mistake again. Valentina picked up the envelope with shaking hands. This is either the most manipulative thing you've ever done, or the most generous. Which do you think it is? She looked at him, really looked at him, for the first time since he'd stepped out of that town car a week ago. The expensive suits and commanding presence were still there, but underneath she could see something that hadn't been there 3 years ago. Humility, patience, the willingness to put someone else's needs ahead of his own wants. I think you've changed, she said quietly. I have changed. Losing you, losing the chance to know Elena and Marcus from the beginning, it broke something in me that needed breaking. Daniel's voice was rough with emotion. I spent 3 years learning how to be the man you deserved, instead of the man I was. And now? Now I'm asking for the chance to prove it. Not to you, though I hope someday I can earn your forgiveness. To them, to our children who deserve to know their father if he's worthy of knowing. A comfortable silence fell between them. Around them, the park buzzed with Sunday afternoon activity. Families playing together, children laughing. The ordinary magic of people who loved each other spending time together. If I said yes, Valentina said slowly, what would that look like? How do we do this without confusing them or disrupting their routine? However you want to do it. Your rules, your timeline, your comfort level. Supervised visits at first, here at the park with me present. Agreed. No gifts. No trying to buy their affection with expensive toys or trips to fancy places. Understood. And if they don't like you, if they're uncomfortable or scared, you walk away without argument. Of course. Valentina turned the envelope over in her hands, weighing possibilities and risks. Why now, Daniel? You could have kept looking for me 3 years ago. You could have fought harder to find me. Why give up then and fight so hard now? Because 3 years ago I was fighting for what I wanted. Now I'm fighting for what they need. Daniel's voice was quiet but certain. The difference is everything. In the distance, church bells chimed 3 o'clock. Somewhere across town, Maya was probably helping Elena and Marcus with an art project or reading them stories about dragons. Her children living their safe, predictable lives, unaware that their mother was making a decision that would change everything. One chance, Valentina said finally. One opportunity to prove you're the father they deserve. But the moment I think you're hurting them, the moment I believe this is about your ego instead of their well-being, it's over. One chance is all I need. Next Sunday, same time, same place, I'll bring Elena and Marcus, and you can meet your children properly for the first time. Daniel's smile was radiant, transformative. Thank you, Valentina. You won't regret this. I hope not. Valentina stood, clutching the legal documents. Because if I do, if you hurt them the way you hurt me, there won't be a second chance. As she walked away, Valentina felt the weight of the decision settling over her. She was about to introduce her children to their father, about to open the door to a future she couldn't predict or control. It was terrifying. It was necessary. And despite everything that had happened between them, despite 3 years of anger and hurt and carefully constructed walls, she found herself hoping that Daniel Clinton really had become the man he claimed to be. Because Elena and Marcus deserved a father who would love them unconditionally. And maybe, just maybe, Valentina deserved a chance at the happiness she'd walked away from 3 years ago. The question now was whether they could build something real and lasting from the ruins of what they'd lost. Only time would tell. But for the first time in 3 years, Valentina was willing to find out. Next Sunday couldn't come fast enough, and yet it couldn't come soon enough at all. If you've made it this far in our story, you understand that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is protect what matters most to you. True power isn't about controlling others or getting what you want through force or manipulation. It's about recognizing when you've made mistakes, learning from them, and fighting to become worthy of the second chances life sometimes offers. Valentina learned that walking away can be the strongest choice you can make, but sometimes staying and fighting for what could be takes even more courage. Daniel discovered that real change isn't about grand gestures or expensive gifts. It's about putting someone else's needs ahead of your own wants, every single day. What would you have done in Valentina's situation? Could you have found the strength to trust someone who had broken your heart so completely? Let me know in the comments below. And if this story reminded you that peace built from struggle is worth more than comfort built on lies, hit that subscribe button and share this with someone who needs to hear it. Because sometimes the greatest victories come not from winning, but from having the courage to try again.